Resiliency. I love our theme verse. Those who trust in the Lord will receive new strength. They will fly as high as eagles. They will run and not get tired. They will walk and not grow weak. Oh, I want that. Because like the rest of you, I get a lot going on just today. So, you have to get up early and look kind of presentable. And then my oldest daughter moves back from her dorm. She'll get here this afternoon. And then I have, it was just my daughter's Summer's 16th birthday. So I have 12 girls coming over tonight to party, to have fun for Summer's birthday. I need that strength. And then we have Mother's Day. And then we leave on a 2-week trip on Monday. So resiliency. My littlest one had a play date the other day. So this little girl walks right into my house and says, I can't have dairy, and that is cheese and milk. So I said, okay, I will not serve you any cheese or milk. And she comes back about a minute later and says, do you have any hot chocolate? And I said, yes, I do. I mean, this is May, y'all. This is not like hot chocolate weather. But I have some in there, that Starbucks canister. I do, but you said you can't drink milk. Milk has, you use milk to make hot chocolate. She stands there a minute thinking, and she says, I think my mom would let me have milk if it is in hot chocolate. Chocolate changes things, y'all know that. Next time, she came over, actually, on Monday, and I had cleared the milk issue with her mom. Turns out it was a Lent thing. And I had hot cocoa already. I'm that mom, right? I'm like, look, Gianna, I got hot cocoa. She sits down in front of it, and she goes, marshmallows are really good with hot chocolate. Children are natural problem solvers. We joke, kids are resilient. Kids are resilient, and they can be. So how do we raise these resilient kids? Well, the Bible never uses the word resiliency. It uses words like steadfast and perseverance. As a matter of fact, 2 Corinthians 4, 8 through 9 here is the strongest verse about resiliency that we could find. It says, this is Paul speaking, we are afflicted in every way, but not crushed. We're perplexed, but not driven to despair. We're persecuted, but not forsaken. We are struck down, but not destroyed. Okay, history has shown us what Paul and the early Christians went through for the sake of the gospel while he's saying this. I read Fox's Book of Martyrs with my oldest daughter. She subtitled it 101 Gruesome Ways to Die. I may have scarred her for life. Let's hope she's resilient. Hopefully these lessons work. But do you know that we are 20 times more likely to label something bad than good? 20 times more likely. That statistic was shocking to me. But then I thought about it. It's true, isn't it? Okay, you're doing homework because this is the learning section, so get out your pen. All right? There's a couple of lines in there. I want you to think about the problems, the first problems that come to mind, the bad stuff you're facing in your life, the issues right now. Take a second to write down one or two of the first ones that come to mind. What are you dealing with right now? Everybody got something? Now I want you to take a good look at that, knowing that we're 20 times more likely to label something bad than good. Is there another side to this? Is this something the Lord is not finished with yet? I love the ancient parable of the farmer and his son. Not a biblical parable, just a wisdom story. So there's a farmer. He has a son, a little farm, 2 horses, and he's got a neighboring farm down the road. So one day the farmer's horses run away. Now the farmer uses them for his livelihood. His neighbor, knowing that, runs over and says, I'm so sorry, my friend, your horses ran away. What are you going to do? And the farmer says, my horses did run away, it's true. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Who knows? Well, the very next day, the horses return. Those 2 horses bring with them 10 wild horses. And the farmer and his son corral them in their horse corral. And the neighbor runs over and says, "Your good fortune, my friend. Look at this. Your horses came back and brought 10 more of them." And the farmer says, "It's true." Is it a good thing or a bad thing? Who knows? Well, the very next day, the farmer's son is out there taming the wild horses. He falls off and he breaks his leg. And their neighbor runs over and says, "I'm so sorry to hear about your son's broken leg. How terrible." The farmer said, "My son did break his leg with taming the wild horses, but is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? Who knows?" Well, wouldn't you know it, the very next day war breaks out and the neighbor's son is sent to war. But the farmer's son can't go because he has a broken leg. And the neighbor runs over and says, "My misfortune, you're so lucky. My son gets sent off to this war. He'll probably never come home and your son can't go because he has a broken leg." And the farmer says, "It's true, my son's leg is broken. He can't go to war. Is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? Who knows?" Our labels in the situation color our attitude. We must teach our children to wait on the Lord to know whether it is a good thing or a bad thing. That verse says we are afflicted, but not crushed. We all have afflictions. We all have stuff going on. I love Dr. Brené Brown's books, The Gifts of Imperfection. She defines resiliency as the ability to overcome adversity. And her research has shown that resilient people have good problem-solving skills, they seek help, they believe in their ability to cope, and perhaps most importantly, they're connected to and supported by others, such as family and friends. And that just doesn't happen. They seek that. According to Dr. Brown, the ability to be vulnerable and have compassion for others' vulnerability is a key element of being resilient. You know, it has been a struggle for me to rid myself of a perfectionist mindset. To admit I'm only human and I make mistakes seems like a very small, very obvious thing, if you know me. But to understand and acknowledge my limitations, that has been freeing. To agree with God, he says he knows we are but dust. He tells us he made us out of dirt. And that's allowing God's grace into our lives. There will always be afflictions, but they don't have to crush us. You know, Jackie Kendall has a great book I'm reading now called Surrender Your Junior God Badge. And if you've ever heard Jackie Kendall speak, or if you are familiar with her writing, she is hilarious. She's always a fun read. It's an easy read. I recommend it. I have it in the magazine for you. But she says that the controlling woman is actually striving to perfect God-like qualities in her life. I mean, they may seem impressive, but ultimately they're a vain attempt to tame the untamable and to avoid suffering. So the woman with this propensity, she says, will actually feel the responsibility to live out the very characteristics of God. Now, lest you fail to recognize yourself in this woman, let me give you some examples that Jackie gives us. The omnipresent, everywhere at once woman, the one that buzzes around everywhere, busy all day, trying to be all things to all people, and in trying to keep everyone happy, what happens to her, guys? Yeah, she's frustrated, she's irritated, she's exhausted. She's no fun. The omnipotent woman, omnipotent means all-powerful. She has these unrealistic expectations of herself. She can do it all herself. She doesn't ask people for help. She doesn't ask for direction. She has trouble trusting anyone else to get the job done. How about the omniscient, all-knowing woman that's constantly educating herself, books and seminars, so she can pressure and control everyone for their own good? Or the sovereign woman. She is always in charge of everything, so she can keep everybody from getting hurt. She is terrified to surrender her awful burden to God, and that is the burden of life, always on her terms. You recognize yourself in any of these? I do. We have to look hard at ourselves before we can take a look at these tendencies in our children, too. So how do we teach our children this resiliency? Well, there are 2 mindsets that we and our children have. The first is a fixed mindset. The fixed mindset is one that's very focused on results. The one that believes that intelligence and skills and talents are innate, that you're born with it or you're not. So your kids say, I'm just not a math person. I'm just not a person that's good with words. That's a fixed mindset. They are very hard on themselves, and they don't like to ask for help for fear of looking stupid. Growth mindsets. That's the other mindset, and they're focused, growth mindset is focused on the process. They know that hard work pays off. More effort can help me meet my goals, and that's being much kinder to yourself. And a person with a growth mindset is not afraid of trying new things because they're not afraid of failure. They know how to ask for help. I'm very proud of my daughter who headed off to college this fall. She joined the choir, something new for her. She joined the mock trial team, and turns out she's really good at it. And I love that because I hid in college. When I graduated from law school, they gave out honor cords with a bit of ceremony in front of everyone. And when I got up to receive mine, I heard somebody say, "Who's that? Has she been here the whole 3 years?" Yes. And guys, this is a graduating class of like 180 students. This is not a huge crowd. When we sat for the bar exam, they seat you alphabetically, 2 to a desk. So I was seated with a guy that had the same last name as me, Mason, my maiden name. And I recognized him from my graduating class at St. Thomas. And I had never spoken to the guy in 3 years at the same small law school. I knew at this point I had to grow in that area if I was going to be successful. So how do you get from that fixed to the growth mindset? How do we do that with our children? So imagine your child is creating an art project. Do any of you have children that you walk in the room and they're in the middle of creating an art project? Yeah, me too. What do you deem more important? The painting, the collage they end up with at the end, the product? Or the learning process that got them to the end product? Or are you the mom that's so afraid of the mess, you don't let the process start? Some of it comes in what we say to our children. Okay, we love our kids, so these things just come out of our mouths, but we got to think a little more carefully about them. So instead of saying, "You're so smart," let's let the thing out of our mouth be, "I'm so proud of how hard you worked. What did you learn from this assignment?" Instead of, "Great win today. I noticed you were respectful of the ref after that call was really unfair." Or, "You treated your teammate kindly even though you were disappointed." Or your kicks, your hits, your strokes, your scores are benefiting from that extra practice. We love our kids. We say, "Oh, what a beautiful kid." And it's true, but how about you put a lot of work into that outfit, nice work. That color goes well with your skin tone. Your smile is contagious. Or my favorite, for my girls are very freckly, "Your freckles make me smile." Instead of, "You are so talented. God has given you a gift. Use it for His glory." Or, "Your practice is paying off." Marissa Lascala, in her article, "Topple the Trophy," says, when someone adopts a growth mindset, failure is just an opportunity to learn. There's no better way to prove that than by sharing with your kids that you've lived through challenges of your own. So, moms, share those embarrassing moments from your childhood with your kids. We all have them. We'd rather forget them, but we have them. It's encouraging for them to see where you were then and where you are now. And yes, they're going to laugh at you, but laughter is good and it opens up communication. Paul says he is perplexed, but not driven to despair. I put a movie for you guys to watch next family movie night, Meet the Robinsons, and you may have seen it. It was a bit of an overlooked movie when it first came out, but my favorite line from that movie is, "From failure you learn, from success, not so much." The Robinson family celebrates failures because something is learned. Plus, I love the talking T-Rex in that movie. It's an animated movie. And it is one of the characters is loosely based on the story of Walt Disney, another extremely resilient man. So get together and watch Meet the Robinsons with your family and ask questions like, why do the Robinsons think you can learn more from failure than from success? What do you consider your greatest successes? And what did you learn from them? What has been your biggest failures? What did you learn from them? For a child to be teachable, the child must be humble. And what kind of kids are pleasant to be around? The humble ones or the ones with overinflated egos that we've created, these little monsters we've created ourselves with our words and our attitudes? Resiliency is being able to tolerate discomfort and have a sense of personal competence as a result. Derek Thompson says in his article, Why American Teens Are So Sad. It was recently in The Atlantic, because you guys know this is an issue on my heart, is teenagers and suicide and depression. Part of growing up, he says, is learning how to release negative emotions in the face of inevitable stress. You can't protect them from the stress, moms. You got to teach them how to deal with it. If kids never learn to do that, they're more likely to experience severe anxiety as teens. Now, I hate to sound like a broken record, if you've heard me speak at all, but what builds this ability to tolerate discomfort and gives a sense of personal competence? Chores at home and summer jobs later on, and allowing them to start their own business with their big ideas and fail. It's okay. You know, my oldest daughter was determined to have an Etsy business when she was about 9, and she made these bizarre little clay things, and so I let her do it, and she said, okay, that was a total waste of money. She learned. And remember, being a contributing member of the family, this is why I emphasize personal competence through chores. They're always going to be part of a family. They're always going to have to contribute to a family in some way. So although it is great to learn to be a member of the soccer team or the robotics club and fulfill your duties there, family first, because that's something they're always going to have to do. Yale University developed what they call the SPACE method to help parents who over-accommodate their children. So let's say your kid is afraid of dogs, and sometimes as mothers we want to protect them from all dogs because we see the fear on their faces and we haven't dealt with our own fears, and it hurts us. So instead of protecting our children from all dogs, which is absolutely unrealistic, just about everybody you visit has a dog nowadays, you start with playing with cute little puppies. They said for kids who hate vegetables, so this exposure method would be to get them to eat broccoli by covering it in whatever you have to cover it in. But get them to eat the broccoli. They call it exposure therapy. I call it common sense. But it is a real problem. Over-accommodation is a real problem we have today. We have to teach our kids to be resilient. God's word says we are persecuted, but not forsaken. You know, if you've been in the corporate world, you may be familiar with the name Ralph Schrader. Ralph W. Schrader is a corporate speaker, but he says, don't tell me the future. I've learned unquestionably that resilience, not prophecy, is the greatest gift. There's no question that hard work focused on a goal is never wasted, even if the destination changes. Their hard work is never wasted if they're working hard, doing whatever it is they're doing, whatever it is they're into, because they will be able to transfer those skills to other things in life. You know, when God works things for our good, it sometimes takes us in different directions than we initially planned. You know, I finished my bachelor's degree in music, and I made plans to attend seminary for a master's in worship music. And surely that's what God wants from us, right? For all of us to go to seminary. On a summer missions trip, I came back to 2 messages on my voicemail. And one, that my housing fell through at the seminary, which was 5 states away, through a bizarre typographical error. And they said, don't come. We have no place for you to live. The other was an offer of scholarship from a law school. Now, I had taken the LSAT, the law school entrance exam, kind of on a whim. And that was a really clear answer from God. I wish he had worked that clearly in everything in my life, don't you? He doesn't very often. But when he does, you better listen. You better obey. We are struck down, but not destroyed, Paul says. This reframing, this choosing to see things God's way, is not pretending that a very real struggle doesn't exist. That is out of touch with reality. Unless you think that's what I advocate, I want to introduce you to my friend Anna. Anna had a very normal pregnancy and was anticipating a very normal birth and life with her newborn. And Anna's daughter Victoria was born with major issues that they did not anticipate. She had multiple open heart surgeries before she was 4 months old. And those of us who prayed fervently for baby Victoria rode this emotional roller coaster with her, with Anna and her husband and her 3 small children that she had at home. So one day baby Victoria would progress, and the next day she would take 2 steps back. And at 4 months old, our precious Victoria was made whole in the arms of Jesus. So months after the funeral, Anna and I spoke, and she had this to say. She said, I think the best thing we can do is pray for God's will to be done, not our own. It's the hardest thing we can do. To die to ourselves and our own desires is nearly impossible. But then God comes in. She said, what kept me going when Victoria was in her last moments was the image of Mary being obedient to the will of the Father, watching Jesus die for us. I'm sure in her heart she didn't want her son to die, but if he hadn't, imagine the catastrophe. And that's how I viewed Victoria's death, she says. Divinely assigned for the greater good, it changes everything. And then she quoted the song, His praise will ever be on my lips. Now notice that Anna attributes resiliency and perseverance to the grace of God. Nothing Anna could do on her own could have ever prepared her to lose a child. To spend 4 months in the hospital with her baby who would never make it home, with 3 other small children at home. Only God's grace can make us desire His will, to die to our own desires. James 1:12 says, blessed is the man who remains steadfast under trial, for when he has stood the test, he will receive the crown of life which God has promised to those who love him. I gave you a number of resources in the magazine, books for adults, and then books that you can read with your small children or your teens or your tweens that are stories of resiliency. And one I've included there is the narrative life of Frederick Douglass, who started life as a slave. I think every American should read that book, that and the autobiography of Benjamin Franklin. So you need summer reading for your kids? I got a list there for you. We are perplexed. These are perplexing times, but we are not driven to despair. Remember, resilience is how you think about the problem. And my challenge to you is to go home this week, this month, all summer long. Help your children relabel the things that they have labeled bad. But they do it all day long. I have theater girls, and they can be very dramatic at times. You know what happened today. My 4-year-old is the worst of all. The boy threw mulch in my lunchbox. That was a real incident from last week. But she was mad about all day. Help your child relabel the things that they have labeled bad. And have your child, once they get used to this idea, they'll do it to you. Have them help you relabel the things, like the traffic, that you have labeled bad. What does God say about it? We can be perplexed, moms, but let's never be driven to despair. Amen? Thank you.